Today I have back a good friend of mine, Matt Warner, who specializes in all things with teamwork and accountability, building that trust within teams. And so I'm so excited to have you back as we dive more into just what does that accountability look like and how that helps when there's conflict and everything within the organization. So excited to have you back.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back. And these are two really fun topics, conflict and accountability, what every leader loves to address and have to work through on their week to week.
Yes. So I would say diving into it, let's just give people kind of a recap because it's been a little bit of a time of just what those two things are when we look at accountability, when we're looking at the conflict and how that kind of affects teams.
Yeah. So everything I'll be sharing mostly comes from Patrick Lencioni's book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And the way he defines conflict is it's really about conflict over ideas. Healthy, high-performing cultures are not afraid to push back on ideas. It's not something that they shy away from. It's something they actually lean in on. And the reason for this is because the belief is when you have great discussions, it leads to great decisions. And yet sometimes on teams and organizations, there's not the freedom to push back on ideas. And when it comes to accountability, the best way to frame this is that everybody has to be doing their best in their job. But what often comes before performance are behaviors. And so the phrase is behaviors precede performance. And athletes are the best way to illustrate this. When an athlete's not performing well, it's always, if not more often, related to a behavior. They're not sleeping enough the night before a game. They're not studying the playbook. They're not watching their diet. They're not working on a skill set. And so high-performing cultures are not afraid to talk about the behaviors that are helping their team or the organization. And they can have honest conversations. Here's the behaviors that are helping. Here's the ones that are not helping. And sometimes that's scary. Sometimes that feels very personal, like, ooh, people are critiquing me. But this is what high-performing cultures do. They're able to have these conversations. Now, of course, the key to all this and the first behavior that has the biggest impact to do conflict and accountability well is there has to be a high level of trust. The team has to trust each other, which really gets down to, can they be vulnerable and real with each other? Can they admit their own mistakes? Can they admit that they need help? Can they see their own blind spots? Because if you don't have that, you will not have good conflict and you will not have healthy accountability if people act like they always have it all together. So,
definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that I think is really interesting is because both of us come from a sports background and how that kind of plays into the whole way of when you are in this very high performing environment, how many of those things that you walk into the office that day, oh, you know what, I slept 4 hours last night, or I ate McDonald's last night for dinner and I feel terrible, and how that really does affect the rest of the day. And if you're not aware of that, you think it's just, oh, I hate my work today or whatever comes into it. But looking at all those little things that play into, hey, this might be affecting it.
Yeah. The holistic approach will certainly help. So when it comes to the topic of conflict, this is more about positive ideological conflict. So it shouldn't be personal. It shouldn't be like mean-spirited or like personal attacks. And it shouldn't be like a passive aggressive behavior where you don't know that I have an issue with you, Christy, and then one day in a meeting, I just submarine you and I surprise you and like overly critique you or an idea that you have. So it's not either one of those extremes. It's not personal attacks. It's not passive aggressive behavior. It's really about, can the team have a passionate debate around ideas? Can you do that? That's really what conflict on high performing teams looks like. Now, sometimes it can be personal. Sometimes it might be conflict, but more often than not for high performing cultures, it's, can they get all the ideas on the table? The good ideas, the bad ideas, the creative ideas, the half-baked ideas. Oh, you want to get all the ideas on the table because it leads to a great discussion, and great decisions usually come from great discussions. And so the team has to be willing to do this. Now, the benefit of doing this and doing it well is it helps you avoid a lot of things. For example, if you can have good conflict, it helps you avoid artificial harmony, which I'm sure you've seen, Christy, where everyone's nodding their head, great idea.
Mhm.
But what are they thinking inside?
They're like, I have no idea. I don't agree with these folks
Yeah.
at all. And they get out the door and they find the next person in the kitchen and like, can you believe? And then you start the chatter
Yeah.
and then you start, making just toxicity within the environment. Yeah.
So my next line, and that is if you avoid artificial harmony, then you're going to avoid the meeting after the meeting, which happens in someone else's office, the water cooler, the parking lot,
Lot. Yeah.
the drive home on the in the car, or what happens on Slack, in another conversation. And sometimes this happens during the meeting. And the other thing it helps you avoid is the meeting before the meeting, where you and I kind of team up and go, hey, if this comes up, we're going to try to steer the conversation a different direction.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean you can't have conversations with teammates, but it's really about your intent. Like if you and I go into a meeting where we kind of know, wink, wink, we're going to steer this a different way, if this comes up, it's probably just healthier if we just address that in the meeting and not have these ulterior motives going into a meeting. We probably just need to be a little bit more courageous and just say it. Hey, I'm not sure, whatever it is, just speak up, say it.
Yeah.
So a team's ability to do this will help you avoid a lot of these pitfalls, and honestly where a lot of energy is spent and it's not the best use of people's time or energy, because all those scenarios we just described, this is a lot of time, effort, and energy that people put into all these side conversations, and it's not the best use of anyone's time, and it's just not healthy. No one wants to work in an environment where this goes nonstop.
Mm-mm. And I'm always curious to think too, since the rise of social media and all of these things, we all see that people struggle to have good conversations. People have a hard time talking to folks as they're passing back and forth these days. And it makes you wonder, what were, company cultures like prior to all that? Could they have good conversations, or was it still the same as what we're experiencing today, just at a different level?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, it's a really good question. I know like some company cultures have been able to do this really well. Like Intel had a phrase that really set their culture apart, and it was disagree and commit. So
Oh, I like
they use that phrase of, hey, we're gonna go into meetings. We know we may not always agree. And that's okay,
Yeah.
because everyone thinks differently, processes differently. But their phrase was, we might disagree, but we've got to commit to something. So we're not going to disagree forever. Eventually, we got to decide something. And that really helped their company culture, because it normalized, hey, we want to disagree. We want the best ideas to always rise to the surface,
Mhm.
but we're not going to disagree forever. Eventually, we got to make a decision. And yeah, so I think, and a lot of organizations, they know that that's a secret sauce, is we've got to get the best ideas on the table. But sometimes for leaders, it's tricky. We go like, I don't know if I want everyone to disagree. I don't know. I just kind of want them to agree with me.
Yeah.
And the leader might have great ideas, but a lot of times if the leader's not open to creating a culture where people can push back, then a lot of times they don't get the buy-in that they want. And so people need to weigh in oftentimes to get the buy-in. So this is why it is really important to create that environment where people can push back.
Yeah.
The other thing too, you talked about culture.
Mhm.
Sometimes the problem with the culture in an organization is understanding the difference between these two words, nice and kind. I think we talked a
Yes,
little
we
bit,
talked about that last time. Yeah.
but it's so important on the topic of conflict, because a lot of times we fool ourselves and we think, oh, I just want to make sure I'm being nice. But for your company or your team to do well, you have to be more okay with speaking the kind truth in real time. So if someone presents an idea and it is not a good idea, or it's got some flaws in it, or it needs to be edited quite a bit, you've got to have the courage to speak the kind truth in real time. And that can be hard. That's often a litmus test to a really high performing culture. is not being afraid to go there. You've got to say it. It's sort of like the TSA rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's like TSA has that phrase, when you see something, or when you see something, they want you to,
report it, say
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And it's the same way on teams. If you feel something, if you hear something, or if hear, see, or feel something, you should say something. Like, you just need to go there. And a lot of times, if teams will just embrace that, now of course your tone, and how you
All
say
of
it,
that comes into the
all that matters.
delivery.
Yeah. You don't get to say, well, I'm just Italian, so I just say it the way I want
Mm-hmm.
to and not be respectful. It's like, no, about. But as long as you're willing to, operate that way, it will save you a lot of energy, time, and heartache if you can just go there. So you have to care enough about the team, the organization, and the person to speak the kind truth in real time, not 3 months later.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be in the moment.
It's like those, hey, I thought about this for 2 months because I needed to get my words in order. And I am guilty of that. Sometimes I won't say something like in that moment. I'm like, okay, well, you need to control your tone, or is this going to show up right? And then it's, a couple hours later, or even like the next morning.
Yep.
But something I've learned too is being bold in those instances, because it is uncomfortable, and
Yep.
finding that to say, hey, I care about this person enough, and I want to, speak these words out of kindness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, this is still under the umbrella of positive ideological conflict. But what we've experienced is that most teams are probably not pushing back enough on ideas. And so they've got to push themselves to do this more. It doesn't usually come natural for most teams or most leaders. There's usually a hesitancy to be too critical or too argumentative. And that makes sense, because most people don't wake up and go, I can't wait to have a passionate debate at work. Like, that's usually not how most people are wired.
And I don't think most people are wired these days either to give the compliments or find the good in something. It's so easy to complain, or so easy to give an excuse of something, instead of being like, hey, I need to look at this from a very different perspective.
Well, and if you're willing to compliment people and encourage them and tell them they did a great job, then when you do have to push back on an idea, it shouldn't be so scary, because hopefully you have a track record of showing those people in your team that you really are for them, that you celebrate them, that you're not stingy when it comes to compliments. But if you hold back on that, then it's probably going to be a lot more scary for you to then push back on their idea, because you're not sure if they know you're for them. And so that's on you or the team to make sure that you're not being stingy to compliment and praise people when they do a good job, or when they do have a good idea. The other thing to keep in mind too is there are some basic things that leaders can do to make sure that conflict comes more naturally. And that is, leaders should always be mindful of mining for conflict. So when you're in a meeting and someone's being very quiet, you intentionally ask them, hey, what are you thinking? Because you normally have great ideas. You're not assuming that their quietness means that they disagree, but you're checking. And this, you just ask them, hey, what are you thinking right now? That you haven't said anything yet. Like, you're just mining for it. And then the other thing that always helps leaders is when your team is having a good conflict, a good debate, a passionate debate around an idea, somebody on the team, if not the leader, needs to say, hey, time out real quick. This is great. We need to do this more often. This is really going to help our organization. This is going to help us perform better. So I just want to encourage you guys, we need to keep doing this in the future. Somebody needs to give what we call real-time affirmation. And then the other thing that'll help leaders is, this isn't a hard, fast rule, but it's definitely a rule to keep in mind, is sometimes the leader needs to go last and lightest when they present their ideas, because if they're always presenting their ideas, what it can say indirectly to the team is, oh, my opinion or my ideas maybe don't carry the same weight, or I don't want to disagree with the leader because they already gave the idea. And so sometimes it's smart. This isn't a hard, fast rule, but sometimes it's smart for the leader to not always present their ideas. Let other people in the team go, and then you will get more buy-in typically. And it just frees up the creativity process. And sometimes a team will feel like, oh, I shouldn't say anything now because the leader already presented.
I had a client last year that did that, and I thought it was the best thing ever. He's, you know, an executive, and his whole thing is, I don't want to be in the room because I want my team to be able to voice what they have, and I don't want them to feel intimidated in any
Mhm.
capacity, but to have that freedom. And then his thing was, hey, you lead it, you tell me how it went, and then he's like, and I'll go praise him afterwards, and then we can have a group meeting from there when things are kind of brought down. And I thought it was such a great way to lead, because you don't see that very often. You see the other scenario, like you said, of, well, that's why I'm in the executive role, because I know how to do these things best. And yeah, you may have some good input, but at the end of the day, I don't know if that's best because you're down here, I'm up here. And
Yeah.
I don't think people do it in ill will necessarily. It's just experience. A lot of times they'll lean into.
Yeah. If you don't let your team have conflict or push back or, question ideas or tell us more why you want to do that initiative, what came to your mind or whatever it may be, it shouldn't be a shock later when you realize you don't have as much buy-in in the project or the initiative or the focus for that year. It shouldn't be a shock because people need to ask questions. They need to push back. They need to process out loud. They need to weigh in oftentimes to get real buy-in. And so sometimes it's a shock to leaders. Like, I don't know why, we're not really doing this well on would it be because you didn't allow any conflict and nobody got to weigh in. And so therefore you don't have good buy-in. The other thing too, that often helps leaders is it's never a bad idea to find out everyone on your team, their history, their personal history when it came to conflict. Like, what was conflict like in their family of origin? Was this oh yeah, we could argue about anything and everything? Or did you grow up in a family that we never argued? It was not allowed? Because everybody's history usually on conflict is slightly different. And so it's doesn't mean that you need to make it therapy, but it's not a bad idea as a leader to find out what was our history like growing up in our families when it came to conflict.
That is really good, because then you know how to address people, and certain things that may rile somebody up won't somebody else.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I know for me, a lot of things is tonality. How is it delivered? Because I'm like, oh, this doesn't seem right. And I'll be apprehensive about being open about it. Where if it's delivered in a different way, it's very easy to have the conflict conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're on a team with everyone who wasn't allowed to argue in their family, well, it's highly likely you're going to need a mind for conflict because it's highly likely those people will not always share what they're thinking or feeling.
Or you get the opposite. You get the folks that get in the room and they, are very aggressive and, sometimes screaming and yelling at each other. And it's one of those, you just want to be like, oh, let me just hit mute and watch back here for a second and let everybody get it out.
Some people grew up in families where they went from 1 to 10 like that. And those people will be reminded, you got to dial it down a little bit. You're a little too fast to, the other thing too to keep in mind is a lot of times teams will really benefit when they talk through this question. What is going to help us have better conversations as a team? So when they start talking about that, is it we need to mind for conflict with each other, or we need to push ourselves to not fall into artificial harmony, or we need to push ourselves to have the conversation here in the meeting and not the meeting after the meeting. So what I just described there is talking through conflict norms. What's going to help us have better conflict as a team? Because most of the time, a team can have this conversation, but if they're not going to talk through what are the new patterns, what are the new behaviors that we're going to do, nothing will change.
Right.
So they need to talk through, hey, as a team, we are learning, we tend to hold back. So we've got to push ourselves to have more conflict in our meetings because we don't have enough conflict, or we have a tendency to always just be nice and we got to speak the kind truth in real time. They need to come up with their own new rules when it comes to how they're going to do conflict. That is a very valuable conversation because or sometimes it's a team that they're always interrupting each other and no one gets to finish their conversation. So whatever those rules are, just take some time to talk through that. And that'll make a big difference. And then the other tip is whatever you decide, you got to keep those new rules in front of you. Like put it on a piece of paper or put it on the whiteboard or put it somewhere on a Google Doc where you're going to see this. And then if you actually follow that for a few months, you'd be amazed how the culture changes in the company. But it's because you're intentional to keep it in front of you versus just having a conversation and then everyone forgets it 3 months later.
And that so easily happens because you have to continue. It's like with anything, you got to keep practicing for it to sink in. And kind of like Kyler's comment here too, if you're comfortable sharing practice with a colleague before it's super emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. So now when it comes to accountability, and this is usually where most leaders and teams struggle the most. And there's a good reason for that. Nobody typically wants to go to work and says, I can't wait to have the awkward conversation with my colleague about the behaviors that they're doing that are holding the team back.
Right. No.
Nobody wakes up going, I am so looking forward to this conversation. Now, some people do, but they're pretty rare if that exciting. And sometimes as leaders, when it comes to accountability, we fool ourselves. We go, oh, I have no problem holding people accountable. I have no problem at all. I fire people all the time. That's great. You can fire people. However, this is the part that's harder for most leaders to admit. Were you addressing the behaviors that you noticed months ago that led to the poor performance? You might have been able to fire them because they didn't meet their numbers for 3 months. You pat yourself on the back, or for 3 quarters, woohoo, I fired them. But you probably noticed 3 quarters ago the behaviors that were going on that led to that poor performance, but you couldn't speak to that. See, that's the harder part about accountability. It's behaviors precede performance. So can your team go there? Can your team have those conversations? And can you do it naturally? Can you just have those conversations? Again, this is why commitment's so important, because once you commit as a team, this is how we're going to behave, or this is how we're going to operate. Then if I have the awkward conversation with you, Christy, about an area that I think maybe you could be better at, it doesn't have to feel so personal because we've already agreed as a team, this is how we're going to operate. This is how we're going to behave. So right. I'm just reminding you what you already committed to. It shouldn't feel like a personal attack. I'm just reminding you what you already said you want to do as a part of being on this team. So, yeah, that's a key piece.
That affects people. So, you know how a lot of times people get promoted to the manager position and it wasn't necessarily because they had the skill set to be there. It's because they've been there the longest. And there's a book, The Peter Principle, that talks about that. But do you see sometimes that folks get moved into those positions? They don't have the ability to have the skill sets that you're speaking to. And so being in a more leadership role suffers because they've never been trained.
Yes, a lot of this is not hard to understand. A lot of this is not impossible to do. You don't even have to be brilliant. It's just, it's easy to understand, but it's hard to do. It's hard to think through, oh, we've got some behavior dynamics in our organization. And until we start addressing those, probably not much is going to change. And we're probably not going to be performing as high as we want to as a team or as an organization. So the leader has to figure out ways to say, it's awkward, but I'm going to lean into it. I've got to start talking about the behaviors. And I think we might have talked about this last time, but it's so powerful of an exercise. I'm going to repeat it. But what the team really should be able to do is to get in a room and be able to have conversations like this. Can we go around? Let's say it's your turn, Chris. Let's say you're the leader. Can we go around and everyone on the team can say, hey, what's a behavior or characteristic that Chrissy does really well that helps the team? Not a skill set, like you make great Excel spreadsheets. We're not talking about that. What's a behavior? So it could be like, Chrissy, you're so encouraging, you're so affirming, you bring great energy and positivity to the team, and it sets the culture. I love that about you. That would be it, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone goes around and says something that you do really well and helps the team, but then you got to go the other way. Yep. And can everyone share a behavior that you need to work on that would help the team more? Mm-hmm. So everyone gets their chance to say it. You get a chance to ask to clarify, like, hey, what did you mean by that? It's not rebuttal time. It's not your chance to argue. It's not your chance to, well, that's not fair because you didn't. No.
You said this, yeah.
You got to hear it. Ask one question to get clarity on it, and then everyone gets a chance to go. Right now, it's going to be really scary if you're the leader for the team to share the behavior that you need to work on that would help the team more. That'll be scary for everyone. And then after this exercise, and this is where the gold is, you got to share what you're going to commit to working on and how the team can help you with that. And someone's got to take notes and keep this somewhere where everyone's going to get a chance to see it for the next couple of months. And you do that exercise and you keep those commitments and asks in front of people, I promise you, things are going to change in the culture of the team or the organization, because you're finally starting to be a little bit more honest with each other, and you're finally starting to create open on-ramps to have those conversations. Yeah. Because it's not easy. But if you have that conversation, if you do that exercise and you talk about it, now that awkwardness is not so bad, because everyone's now admitting, here's something I need to work on, and here's how the team can help me. And that is a game changer.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And yeah, I remember you spoke to that, but it's something that everybody should start integrating in. And what do you recommend? Is that something people are doing once a month? Is it once a quarter?
Once a month might be a little bit too much, but it should be something that once they do it once, hopefully they've kind of normalized it a little bit. It's not so scary. People are being a little bit more vulnerable with each other. Now, of course, that exercise I just described, that's going to be a nightmare if you don't have high trust.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have a culture where people can admit that they made a mistake, or they need help, or that they're not perfect, or that they can apologize openly and honestly, if you don't have that kind of high trust, that kind of conversation is going to be probably really challenging, and it could be really messy. So
you're going to be handing out Kleenexes and Band-Aids afterwards. Yeah.
Now, it's smart for the leader to know, are we there yet? Maybe you might like that idea so much, you go, I'm doing that tomorrow. It's like, whoa. Do you have the trust yet? Do you need to start managing people with a little bit more finesse to get to that exercise down the road? So you gotta know that at your gut. Are we ready for that yet? Because you might have some people that, they can't wait to just everybody. It's like, well, that person's gonna need some coaching from you, way before you do an exercise like that.
They're going to be the ones at the dinner table the night before, getting riled up, ready to come in.
Yeah. There are some people like that. So accountability, it's really also, sometimes as leaders, we fool ourselves. We tell ourselves, it's my kindness that keeps me from holding people accountable. It's because I love my team so much, and I don't want to be a micromanager, or I don't want to be too cruel. And we fool ourselves saying it's my kindness that's keeping me from holding people accountable. But a more honest self-reflection would probably be pointing out to us that it's actually sometimes a lack of courage, or a people-pleasing tendency, or it's really selfish because we don't like the thought of saying something that could make you uncomfortable, and you may not respond well, and that's so uncomfortable for us. That's what's causing us to not say what we need to say. And so we fool ourselves sometimes saying, it's because I'm so nice, or I'm so kind, or I'm so big-hearted. And it's like, a lot of times it's not about that. And I've seen that in my own self. I don't like those conversations. They're hard for me. And it's because I have a big people-pleasing side to me. Mm-hmm. And so to be a good leader does require that self-awareness, to know what's keeping me. Why am I holding back from saying what I've noticed weeks ago that I still haven't had that conversation about?
Yeah. I know. And I would say for mine on that, it is, I used to not hold back on a lot of things. And then it was, hey, you need to dial this back. And now I've dialed it too far back, where I'm like, all right, well, is the tone of delivery good? Is this really worth my breath to say this? And it's so sad that it went from, it went to the extremes. It's like how to find that happy medium again, and be able to say to say what people need to hear. And so it's a little bit of struggle. It's been, I've been working on it for the last couple of years, but it is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be a really good leader does, I think, take good self-awareness to know what your weaknesses are, your areas that, okay, this is going to be hard for me. I don't do well with accountability. I kind of just like everyone to like me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then holding people accountable is going to be a stretch for you.
Yeah.
Because here's what typically happens too. A lot of times leaders will start to notice behaviors that they think need to be addressed. But unless you've gotten comfortable with this, you'll hold on to it for a while and you won't say it for a while. And then you finally look for that opportunity to bring it up. But you've been thinking about it and stewing on it for a month or two. Well, that's not helping your organization if you're noticing things and you're holding on to it for a long time. So a lot of times it's just like the 3 seconds of courage. You just have to lean into it. And yes, it's going to be awkward. Yes, you might want to have done it better, next time, but you got to go there. You got to be able to speak about the behaviors that are holding the team back. And so the other part of this that's very powerful, and the reason why this accountability really matters is because a lot of times if you don't, speak into these behaviors, there's a lot of drama that goes on behind the scenes.
Yes.
And the other thing too that often gets overlooked is peer-to-peer accountability often carries a lot more power and weight than sometimes an organization or a leader is aware of. Because if the culture, let's say where you're the leader, Christy, and everybody feels like, well, Christy has to be the one to hold everyone accountable. What happens is if I have an issue with another person, I tell you about it, and then you go talk to that other person. And then what's their first thought when you have that conversation with them? What are they typically thinking and feeling?
It's intimidating because it's like, why couldn't that other person, you didn't respect me enough to come talk to me yourself. You had to go find, somebody to kind of be the shield.
Yep. Yeah. And they typically feel like, who ratted me out? Who said that? So they already feel a high level of distrust on the team. And then the other thing also that happens is when you start to tell this person like what you heard or what was the feedback given to you, how often is that person's version of the story the same as the version of the story that I just told you?
It's very different.
It's often, there can be big differences or minor ones, right? And now you as the leader, after you've had that conversation, what do you then have to do next?
Right. Now you got to go kind of do damage control in many ways to get where things need to be and build the trust back with that person that should initially have come to you.
Yeah, there's damage control. And then even before that, it's you got to come back to me. And then you got to say, well, here's the version of the story that I heard. And now you're being the personal investigator. And how much time could that have taken you right there in your week? Just those two conversations.
Exactly. It's a lot of wasted time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the power with building a strong culture of like healthy accountability is your time is not going all over the place. And that's just between two people on the team.
Yeah. Imagine if it's a big team.
Yes. Imagine a team of 8 or 9 or 10. And if the culture is the leader has to hold everyone accountable, then the leader's time is going to get wasted quite a bit. And so you want to create a dynamic where everybody understands, hey, this is what we've committed to working. We're committed to working this way. This is our company values, our culture. And so now the team can hold each other accountable.
Yep.
And it doesn't always have to be the leader that does this. So it really helps you avoid like a lot of wasted time and effort.
Mm-hmm.
But the leader has to show that they're willing to address the difficult issues and the leader's willing to address the poor behaviors.
Yep.
Because if let's say I'm on your team and I notice, let's say, Christy, you'll never have that difficult conversation with people, the chances of me holding someone else on the team accountable for, let's say, poor behavior or poor performance, if I know you wouldn't get my back or you wouldn't do it yourself, I'm not probably going to stick my neck on the line to do that.
Yeah.
So the leader has to be willing to address the difficult issues. Otherwise, peer-to-peer accountability won't happen. Mm-mm. The team has to witness, oh, Christy would do this. If she was here, she would say something. And that helps empower the team to know, okay, we can do this, because Christy would say something if she was here right
Yeah.
now.
And I think sometimes people get so stuck on, there are certain people, I call them the advocates in the group, and they're always the one to fight for everybody else, to be their advocate, thinking that they don't have the ability to speak up for themselves. And I've been, in that position, being the advocate sometimes, but it's kind of sad, because you could steal the power away from somebody else that
Yep.
has the ability to speak.
Yep.
It's just, hey, well, in the past you never have, so don't worry, I got you.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I don't know if I shared this story last time we spoke, but the 49ers back in the 80s and 90s, when they had their coach, Bill Walsh, as their coach, they were known for having a really healthy culture.
Hmm.
And one of the parts of their culture that was unique was this peer-to-peer accountability. So there was a story where they brought in a free agent and he got injured before one of the games, and he didn't even go to the stadium. He didn't even go to the game. He just stayed home. And the coaching staff didn't even have to address that player, because they had such a strong culture of accountability that the coaching staff knew our players are already going to take care of this.
Wow.
And sure enough, they did. They told the player, "Hey, this is your one strike, but this won't happen again. Even if you're injured, you come to the games, you support the team." The coaching staff, the whole culture of the organization was so strong when it came to accountability. The coaches even knew, I don't think we even need to address this, because we know our players, they get it, and they're gonna. The peer-to-peer accountability was just so strong. So that's a great example of when it's done well. Hopefully the upper leadership doesn't even need to get involved sometimes, because they know it's going to be taken care of in the organization.
Yeah. And I've seen too, where you'll have healthy at the top and some healthy departments, and then you have some departments within an organization that are really struggling and they lack that accountability. People are kind of all over the place. How have you seen where then the other departments or even upper management has to come in and help these departments kind of get realigned because things have gone sideways?
Yeah. Are you talking because one department's really struggling and other ones are high performing? Is that the same thing? Okay. Well, typically, if one department is struggling and not maybe performing well, there could be a lot going on there. There could be reasons for it that maybe aren't so obvious, but sometimes it's just a leader's inability to address it. Other times, what can often happen in departments is two departments may not like each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be because the leaders at the very top aren't really focusing on being cohesive and being united and being on the same page and rowing in the same direction. And by the way, you might think nobody notices it, but you are leading two different departments and there's another leader on your executive team that you don't really like. People usually pick up on it, or they'll pick up on it in how you talk about another department, the way you describe that team or the other team. They'll pick up on those nuances, and it will often create silos that people will feel down the road. So the leadership has to be intentional to go, am I really giving this leader the benefit of the doubt? Do I need to have a one-on-one with them? Do I need to have a moment to air out my grievances, or like, gosh, we really need to work on our connection because we don't get along really. We're faking it. Like we fake this chemistry, but it's not really there. So when leaders are honest and they can be honest with each other, but also be gracious and kind in how they do it, it can have a big trickle down effect in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the reason I brought it up, I had a client earlier this year, and they had that problem. There was just one department. Everybody else was aligned, good to go. And it was just one department. And they, for the life of them, could not get them on board to see things through the lens that the rest of the company was seeing. And it comes down to the main leader of that department that kind of started the problem, and it trickles down. But there wasn't anybody even lower than that leader that saw the issue either. They had all bought into what that department lead was telling them.
Yeah. So one principle that can help sometimes is if one department is really struggling, it could be that leader of that department has a mindset of, hey, this executive team it's not as important as my team. Like my team is the most important, but a strong leader can say, when I come to these executive team meetings, I'm willing to take my department hat off and I'm willing to put on the company hat or this executive team hat and say, what is going to help the whole organization thrive? And I've got to be having that mindset when I come to these meetings. Sometimes as leaders, we think, well, the department I lead is the most important department because how they perform impacts your salary, or these are the people you hired, or these are the people you spend the most time with. You might even like those people more. But high performing cultures, those leaders of those departments, they can come and they can give their perspective, but they're willing to take their department hat off and put on like the company hat or the executive team hat and go, I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to, forego certain things to help out the other departments because that's what's going to help the company. They have to have that mindset. So if one department is struggling, what I just described may not be the issue, but it sometimes can be where they have too much of a focus and they're not thinking big picture for the whole benefit of the company. That could be something maybe below the surface.
Yeah. And I've even seen that at the executive level too, where sometimes they can't see the larger picture. They get stuck in kind of the blinders on, just moving this way. And there's all of this out there to be able to move into. And once they get to that point, there's a lot of freedom that seems to come within the organization that I've seen of, hey, we're all a lot more open to have conversations and things aren't so tightly, kept. And upper leadership is more willing to share, hey, this is where our company's going. Here's our 3 to 5 year plan. We're not holding it so tightly because we now have trust with everybody that works with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If one department's really struggling and that executive team has never had honest conversations about, hey, what are the behaviors that could be going on our executive team that would help the whole company do better? Like, that would be a great exercise to do. It's like, hey, let's just be honest. What are the behaviors that we're seeing on this executive team that help? Mm-hmm. And what are the behaviors that we're seeing that don't help? And if a leader's never gotten that feedback from other executives, that could be really insightful and that could help that leader. And it's possible they're not being honest with each other. And so, they might need to lean into that. We're not being fully transparent with what we're noticing. So, a lot of times this is not impossible to understand, but it's hard to do.
Yes.
So I love it when Patrick speaks in front of groups. He says, there's a technical term for this. I don't like holding people accountable. And the technical term is, I'm a wuss. Mm-hmm. Don't like doing it. He's like, everyone who knows me knows I don't like doing this. He's like, my family knows this. And that's really what it comes down to a lot of times is we're a little scared to do it. And 3 seconds of courage really makes a big difference. Lean into it. Of course, how you say it, your tone, do you have high trust? If you don't have high trust, then you got to start there. Yeah. But that really makes a big difference.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think of, what are the hard things that you're going to do today? Choose your hard. And, maybe it's really hard to have this conversation, but like with anything, the more you practice having these, then it becomes easier and easier. And now you don't need that 3 seconds of courage anymore. It just naturally comes out. And that's just a really cool place to get to.
Yeah. And if you're a leader and you're like, man, I'm really weak at this, then, what's a good baby step to take is then just start working on being really encouraging right away. Mm-hmm. And then once you start developing that, then start sprinkling in, hey, be encouraging, but also give feedback right away. And just all of a sudden you'll notice, I can give positive and I can give some negative. And then it'll help you because you're getting more comfortable with it. If you sprinkle both in, that might make it feel easier for you. That's often like a good baby step to take. It's just start being positive and negative, so to speak, but it'll make it not so scary down the road.
And I forget who it was. I don't know if it was Patrick's material or somebody else that talked about if you hear so many negative comments, it takes a ridiculous amount of positive to offset those.
Yeah. No, it's certainly true. I mean, that's that's something I think has been out, been people
Long
are
time.
for a while. But yeah, no, that's why. Yeah, your culture, your positivity. Can you give compliments? Are you humble enough to give people, credit when they deserve it, or speak about what they did? Like, you want to have that kind of humility where you can freely encourage people, and you want enough of that people smarts that you know how to talk to people in a way that gets the best out of them,
Yeah.
versus just screaming at people. But are you smart enough? Do you have common sense around people? Do you know how your words and your actions impact people? And can you use that to your advantage to get the best out of them? That's a key part to being a good leader too, which if people that are listening or watching are interested, that Patrick has this book called The Ideal Team Player, where he talks about the ideal team player is someone who's humble, hungry, and smart, meaning good with people, having common sense with people. And in fact, Patrick would say, if your culture doesn't have enough of ideal team players, people that are humble, hungry, and smart, you're going to have a lot of dysfunction on your team, because those three virtues really make your team have a greater chance of having high trust, healthy conflict, active commitment, real accountability, and then of course getting the results you want. But if you don't have people that have those three virtues, it'll be hard to have those behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. I've read that one. That was a fun read. I enjoyed that one. Well,
Yeah.
I've read, I think, pretty much all of his books, but still,
Yeah.
they're fun because of the stories inside of them makes them enjoyable. But there's a couple questions I think in here that I think would be really fun to have you speak to. I think this one right here by Mech. What do you think about great leaders you've worked with, and how did they handle conflict or accountability differently?
Well, I think great leaders, they don't hesitate. They just lean in. They don't put it off. They have those conversations. Great leaders are also often very encouraging and affirming, and they're not stingy to give compliments. And so when they are able to do that, then they're not so scared to have the conflict or the accountability conversation, because they've communicated throughout the weeks or months that they are for those people. So good leaders are just more aware of how they're coming across, and they know, like, okay, I've complimented this person enough. They just came on board. I've given them a lot of compliments. Now I've noticed some behaviors. I'm going to lean in, and I'm not going to avoid it. And they do a good job of creating a culture where feedback is normalized. And this is a good tip for any leader: is you want to create a dynamic, a culture where we're constantly asking for feedback. Everybody's asking for feedback. Hey, it's the first time I've done that presentation. Hey, Christy, what do you think of that? Any tips, any suggestions? Because if I can do that to you freely, then you're more likely to give me that feedback. I'm more quickly to perform and get better because you're going to give me some good tips. But if I am very slow to ask for feedback, then it's going to take you a while to finally give it to me.
Yeah.
Right? So if you want to excel in your career, just be the person who's constantly asking for feedback with your boss, with your colleagues, your teammates. You'll accelerate a lot quicker and faster because you're learning a lot along the way. And people will often sit on it for a while.
Yeah.
And if they have feedback for you, if you're not an open person to ask for it all the time, they might sit on that feedback for weeks or months. And that's not helping your progression. Or your career if they hold on to it for a long time. So there's a little bit of a tangent from the question, but great leaders lean into it and they don't hesitate.
Yeah.
How you do it, all that stuff matters, but they don't hesitate.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, especially on the things where you do need feedback to grow. And it's a lot of times when you're new to an organization or new to a complete different role within an existing organization you've been in. And it's that curious mindset of always asking. And it helps you learn. It helps you find those blind spots a lot quicker. And you do excel. And I've seen that's always been me to a certain point, because it's that curious mindset I think sometimes drives people nuts. Like, oh my gosh, how many more questions are you going to ask? And I'm like, well, hey, we want to learn.
And you might be someone on the call who's watching or listening. You're like, I'm going to start doing that. And it'd be amazing how many other people start following your lead. So it takes one person to be like, I'm going to ask for feedback a lot. And you might be surprised how many other people on your team or in your organization start doing it too.
Yeah.
So you can lead up in your organization just by saying, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to go for it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a lot of courage that goes with that too, because it is scary initially and things like that, especially if you're right out of college and you're moving into your first job. It's a different dynamic than being in school and you're asking a teacher, hey, what is some feedback for this paper to make it better, or this
It's
presentation?
super scary. Yeah, it's super scary. But if you can do it, what it'll communicate to everyone else is also how brave you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not normal. People don't typically say, hey, I've got this big presentation. Hey, afterwards, please give me some feedback. Not everyone does that. And so it might be scary, and you might hear some things that sting and hurt, and oh man, that kind of bruised my ego a little bit. But it also shows a lot of courage and bravery that you are putting yourself in those kind of contexts as well.
Yeah. I remember even a job I had, one of my friends we became friends through the job, is every time we'd go to lunch or dinner, it would be reflecting, all right, we're on site with this client. What were the pros and cons of today? What could I have done better? Where did I show up better? And vice versa. And it just made it really fun, because we would even challenge each other. Hey, did you see this person's face when you were talking this way?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, I didn't. Let me watch for that tomorrow when we go back into the room and have the conversations.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's a great practice. Yeah, let's just review how it went and let's just talk through it. Yeah.
You learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
This one's interesting too. How can teams create psychological safety without lowering expectations?
Yeah. I think developing the high level of trust, like where I know more about, let's say you, and I know more about like just your history, your past, your hopes, your dreams. The more I know about you, the less likely I'm going to be overly critical about you. And I'm going to give you like grace and margin. And if I do have to say the hard thing or bring up something that's difficult or challenging, I'm more likely to say it with a more positive growth tone because I know you and your story, and versus just being overly critical because you didn't do something well. So the way you create that psychological safety is you're just constantly investing in the people you work with. So you get to know them, right? This is what I mean by high trust. You're getting to know people. So Stephen Covey wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and his son has the same name as him, and he also is an author, which is super convenient when you're he wrote a book called The Speed of Trust, and he likens trust to a bank account. And his whole point is, if you want trust to be strong on your team, you've got to always be investing in it. You always got to be making deposits, making it grow if you want it to be strong down the road. And if a team or a leader does that, then it's not so scary to have those harder conversations about expectations or behaviors or performance, because you've been investing in those relationships. You've been investing in the team. And a lot of times, and I've been victim of, or I've done this too, is I don't even know like the names of people on my team and their spouses. And it's like, I don't know them that well. It's like, ooh, the first time I started becoming more aware of this content, I was like, oh, I think I'm developing trust, but I don't know the people I work with that well. And so it was kind of humbling for me to realize, oh, I'm not investing in the people I work with as much as I think I am.
Yeah. I know it's interesting. Like how do you balance that as well too? You want to be able to know them and be able to respect them because of that. And then I've seen flip sides of it where it's almost too much, and then it creates an awkward workplace when everybody's business.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, work can't be therapy. It's not like it's to get to know everyone on that level, but we should get to know them enough to where, and the reason why I'm even saying this getting to know them part is because there's this thing called the fundamental attribution error. And if you're not careful, you'll see behaviors or differences in people and you'll attribute it to their character or their intent without knowing the backstory. So the more you get to know people, the less likely you're going to fall into the fundamental attribution error, and you're going to allow more margin and grace for people without being overly critical about them. So that's why you want to invest in the relationships, because this is a human tendency. It's a human tendency to be overly critical about your character or your intent when it was like you just showed up to a meeting late, or you just responded to emails late. And I make it about your character or your intent, that you're lazy or you're not bought in or you're aloof, right? Or whatever it is. But if I don't respond to your emails, it's because of my circumstances, that I'm overworked, or so if I'm not careful, you can do that to people. So the more you invest in getting to know people, the less likely you'll do the fundamental attribution error.
Yeah, I would agree. And we'll do one last one. That is, how do you keep empathy alive between departments that rarely interact?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing it would be ideal if the leadership of the organizations would realize, oh, it's good for our departments to occasionally meet each other. And maybe that's just not the culture. So how do you keep empathy high between departments that don't interact? I think you just have to give them the benefit of the doubt, realize that it's easy to, like I just said, fall into the fundamental attribution error. So it's easy to make someone else really bad when really they're not that bad. And the classic example of this is, we all do this on the fundamental attribution error. Someone cuts you off on the freeway and you have a lot of thoughts about their character or their intent. They're narcissists, they're reckless, they're self-absorbed, they're the kind of person that kicks puppies, whatever it is. But you cut someone off on the freeway and it's, oh, sorry, I didn't see you on my blind spot, or you were on your phone for a second, or gosh, you're overreacting, you need to take an anger management class. And see, the difference there is, it wasn't like my character or my intent, but it was their character, it was their intent. And so the way that you keep empathy high, even with departments that may not interact a lot, is you just become aware of, oh, this is a thing that we can actually demonize or make someone all bad. And we got to be careful we don't do that on this team.
Yeah.
Especially with people we don't interact with a lot. We don't know what's going on for them. We don't know. No. So we give them the benefit of the doubt. We don't jump to conclusions. We don't fill in the margin with things that we don't know, or we don't fill in the blank with things that we don't really know. So we got to be careful that we don't do that. It's a mental discipline to not do that.
Yeah. No, it's so true. How many times? And then like I actually had that the other day. I was driving along and honked the horn at the guy because the light was green and he wasn't going. Well, there were all these barricades, which I couldn't see because of where I was in the line, and folks were crossing the street. Yeah, so instead of, being nice about it, he flips me off, turns the corner, flips me off again. And I'm like, thanks, bud. I just couldn't see 3 cars in front of me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much as always.
This is great. I really enjoyed it.
I love talking about all the leadership things and just the uniqueness that every company has inside, because people bring a lot to the table when they lead. Everybody runs things just slightly different. And so if anybody ever wanted to work with you, what is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, they can email me at matt.warner@leadeffect.org. matt.warner@leadeffect.org. And if this content really resonates with people, also just getting the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is a great place to start too. That book's, a lot of what we talked about today is from that book.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. And anybody else, if you have questions, keep having them come in. We'll go back through and answer those throughout the week.
Great.
Thanks.